Do you know what it feels like to stand in the line of danger for someone who has never looked at you as equal, to shield a life that has never truly seen yours? Sometimes the strongest souls wear the simplest uniforms. Sometimes the most broken hearts carry the heaviest courage. And sometimes it is the maid, the invisible shadow, in the mansion, who becomes the shield. When the storm breaks loose, the voice trembles with emotion, as the screen fades in on a vast mansion gleaming under the night sky. The chandeliers sparkle through the windows, the polished marble floors reflecting wealth and power. But in one corner of this palace, in the servants' quarters, sits a woman named Grace, dark-skinned, her hands rough from years of labor, her back bent from scrubbing floors and carrying burdens no one else notices. She hums softly to herself, a lullaby that echoes memories she keeps, buried, memories of a past that no one in this house knows, memories that still burn like hidden embers in her chest. Inside the grand hall, the billionaire Alexander Hale paces back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. His voice is commanding, sharp, impatient. "I don't care what the market looks like. Close the deal. If they don't like it, walk away. I'm not in the business of compromise." He hangs up abruptly, his jaw tight, his eyes cold as steel. To the world, Alexander is untouchable, a man who built empires with his will alone. To his staff, he is distant, a man too busy to even know their names. But Grace knows his routine better than anyone. She knows how he likes his shirts pressed, how his coffee must be exactly 2 degrees hotter than lukewarm, how silence is the language he prefers at breakfast. She knows because she watches, listens, adjusts. For years, she has moved like a shadow in this house, seen but unseen, necessary but never acknowledged. And yet deep within her heart, she has a loyalty that surprises even herself. For beneath her humility is a woman who once lived a very different life. That night, as the clock strikes midnight, the mansion falls into silence. The guards outside yawn, the maids retreat to their small rooms, and Alexander remains in his study, papers spread out before him, the fire crackling faintly. Grace lingers longer than usual, dusting the shelves that don't need dusting, polishing the surfaces already shining. Something gnaws at her, a feeling she can't explain, a tension in the air, as if the wind itself is holding its breath. Suddenly, the crash of shattered glass cuts through the silence. Shouts follow. Heavy boots storm across the marble floor. Grace freezes for a split second before instinct takes over. She rushes toward the noise, toward the billionaire's study. The double doors burst open, and 3 masked men surge in, guns raised, eyes filled with malice. Alexander stumbles backward, shock written across his face for the first time in years. "What is this? Who are you?" he demands, but his voice trembles. One of the intruders growls, "Sit down, Mr. Hale. Tonight, you're not the one giving orders." The gun glints under the chandelier's glow, pointing straight at the billionaire's chest. His breath catches, his body stiffens. Fear, real, unfiltered fear, rushes through his veins. Before he can move, Grace bursts through the doorway. "Stop!" Her voice, usually quiet and submissive, slices through the chaos. The intruders turn their heads, momentarily stunned by the maid standing tall, her arms spread wide, as if her fragile frame could block bullets. Alexander stares at her in disbelief. The woman who mops his floors, who carries his laundry, is now standing between him and death itself. One of the men sneers. "Move aside, woman. This isn't your fight." Grace's eyes blaze with defiance. "It became my fight the moment you stepped into this house." Her words carry weight, a strength that doesn't match her uniform. For a second, silence hangs heavy in the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The leader snarls and lunges forward, shoving her aside. But Grace doesn't fall. She moves with surprising precision, grabbing his wrist, twisting it sharply. The gun clatters to the ground. Alexander's eyes widen. He has never seen anything like this. Not from her. Not from anyone like her. The other men rush forward, but Grace is faster than they anticipate. She dodges, strikes, moves with a rhythm that feels rehearsed, like muscle memory carved into her very bones. Within seconds, 2 men are disarmed, groaning on the floor. The last one hesitates, staring at her with recognition. You were supposed to be gone." Grace's face hardens. "And you were supposed to stay buried in the past." The man bolts, disappearing into the night, leaving chaos in his wake. The silence that follows is deafening. Papers flutter from Alexander's desk. The firelight flickers, and his breath comes in short, shallow gasps. He stares at Grace as though seeing her for the first time. The woman who polished his silverware now stands before him like a warrior from another world. His voice cracks as he speaks. Who are you?" Grace lowers her gaze, her chest heaving. For a moment, she looks almost fragile again, almost small. "I'm just the maid, sir," she whispers. But the words ring hollow, because Alexander knows there is far more to her story. He takes a hesitant step forward. His eyes soften, but confusion grips him. No, you're not. No maid moves like that. No maid stares death in the eye and doesn't flinch. You've done this before." His words hang between them, heavy with suspicion and awe. Grace turns toward the broken window, the night air rushing in, carrying with it the scent of danger not yet finished. Her voice is low, almost trembling. "There are things about me you don't know, things I hoped would stay buried, but tonight they found me again." She looks back at him, her eyes shimmering with both sorrow and strength. "And if you value your life, Mr. Hale, you'll start listening, for once, not with your pride, but with your heart." The fire crackles louder, as if urging the silence to break. Alexander swallows hard, his mind reeling. For the first time, the billionaire who thought he controlled everything stands powerless, dependent on the maid he had barely noticed until this night. His empire, his wealth, his arrogance, all feel small compared to the secret standing in front of him. And as the mansion trembles under the shadow of the attack, one thing becomes clear. Grace is not who she appears to be, and her past is about to unravel the future of them both. The broken glass still crunched faintly under their shoes as silence pressed heavy against the walls of Alexander Hale's mansion. Outside, the guards scrambled, confused, too late to have prevented what had already happened. Inside, the firelight flickered across Alexander's face, revealing the disbelief etched in his sharp features. He had stared down CEOs, politicians, and ruthless rivals in boardrooms across the globe. But tonight, staring at his maid, he was lost in confusion, in awe, and in fear. "Grace," he said slowly, almost as if the name itself suddenly carried weight. "What just happened? The way you fought? Those weren't instincts. That was training. Years of it. Who are you?" Grace stood with her back half turned, her hands still trembling, though her face fought to remain calm. Her dark eyes avoided his gaze. She had lived in shadows for so long, it almost hurt to be seen. She exhaled sharply. "I told you before, I'm just the maid." Alexander's voice rose, not in anger this time, but desperation. No, you're not. I watched you disarm 3 men like it was nothing. You saved my life. People don't just do that, Grace, not unless they've done it before. Tell me the truth." Her jaw clenched. For a moment, the weight of her secrets pressed against her chest like a stone too heavy to bear. She finally met his eyes, and he saw something there. Pain, grief, guilt, all woven into one. "The truth, sir," she said, her voice low, "is something I left behind years ago. I buried it so deep that I prayed no one would ever dig it up again. But tonight, it dug itself out." Alexander stared at her, speechless. The sound of distant sirens echoed faintly in the night, but neither of them moved. Finally, His voice softened. "Then let me hear it. You risked everything to protect me, and I don't even know who you are. If you trust me enough to stand between me and a bullet, then trust me enough to tell me why." Grace's breath shuddered. She turned away, her eyes fixed on the shattered window as the night breeze curled around them. "Trust isn't easy for me," she whispered. "But maybe it's time." She sank into the leather chair across from his desk, her hands clasped so tightly they shook. Alexander leaned forward, his usual arrogance stripped away, leaving only raw curiosity. Grace began, her voice carrying the weight of a story that had been locked away for too long. "Before I wore this uniform, before I cleaned your floors and ironed your suits, I wore another uniform, one that came with medals, ranks, and enemies you couldn't imagine. I wasn't always a maid, Mr. Hale. I was a soldier." Alexander's breath caught. A soldier? Her lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. "Not just any soldier. I was part of an elite unit, trained to go where others wouldn't, to face things others couldn't. My life was missions, orders, and survival. And for years I thought that was who I was meant to be, until the mission that destroyed everything." Her voice cracked on the last word. Alexander, for the first time in his life, felt the sting of humility. He leaned forward, softer now. "What happened?" Grace's eyes glistened as memories surged, unwanted but unstoppable. "We were sent into a village, far from here, far from the eyes of the world. We were told it was a rescue operation, but it wasn't. It was a trap. My unit, my brothers, my sisters, they didn't make it out. I was the only one left, and the faces of the people we were meant to save still haunt me. Their screams." She broke off, swallowing hard, her hands tightening until her knuckles whitened. "When I came back, I wasn't the same. I didn't want medals. I didn't want honor. I just wanted to disappear. So I did. I left that life behind, and here I am." Alexander's world tilted. The maid he had overlooked for years was now revealed as a woman forged in battle, carrying scars deeper than wealth could comprehend. He whispered, almost to himself, all this time, you've been here, hiding, and I never knew." Grace looked at him, her voice steady but fragile. "I didn't want you to know. People see me as the maid, and that's enough. It's easier than explaining the ghosts that follow me." For once, Alexander had no clever response, no hard edges to shield him. He saw her, not as the maid, not as the soldier, but as a human being who had carried more than most could endure. "Grace," he said softly, "I owe you my life, and I don't just mean tonight. I mean, maybe I owe you more than I ever realized. You've been here all along, and I—" His voice faltered. "I never even looked at you." Grace gave a faint, bitter laugh. "People like me don't get looked at, sir. We get passed by." The words struck him harder than any insult ever had. For the first time, the billionaire who thought he had everything felt the sharp sting of shame. He lowered his gaze. "You're right, and I don't deserve your loyalty after the way I've treated you." Her eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "This isn't about deserving. Tonight it was about doing what needed to be done. That's who I am. That's who I'll always be." Before Alexander could reply, the mansion doors burst open. Security rushed in, guns drawn, faces pale. "Sir, are you all right?" one of them shouted. Alexander raised a hand to silence them, his eyes still fixed on Grace. For the first time in his life, the billionaire dismissed his wealth, his guards, his empire. The only person he trusted in that moment was the maid who wasn't just a maid. Grace stood, straightening her uniform, as though trying to shrink back into the role she had worn for so long. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "This wasn't random. This was personal, against you, and against me, and next time we may not be so lucky." Alexander's eyes narrowed, a fire igniting in them. "Then we face it together." He took a step closer, his voice steady. "I don't care who you were, Grace. Soldier, maid, ghost of the past, you're the only reason I'm standing right now. From this moment on, you're not invisible. Not to me." Her lips parted slightly, as though words were caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not in years, maybe not ever. She turned away, her voice quiet but trembling with unspoken emotion. "Be careful what you say, Mr. Hale. Seeing me means seeing everything, and not all of it is something you'll want to face." The firelight cast shadows across their faces, his lined with newfound humility, hers etched with the weight of secrets not yet revealed. The night outside still carried danger, but inside that study something had shifted. The maid was no longer invisible, and the billionaire for the first time realized that the strongest person in his world wasn't the man who owned the mansion, but the woman who protected it. And somewhere in the silence that followed, unspoken but undeniable, the beginning of something far deeper than either of them had expected took root. The morning after the attack, the mansion no longer felt like the fortress it once was. The broken window had been covered, guards doubled at the gates, but an unease hung heavy over the air. Alexander Hale hadn't slept. His mind replayed every moment of the night before. Grace standing between him and death, Grace moving like a soldier, Grace confessing the past she had tried to bury. He found her in the kitchen, quietly cleaning up broken porcelain left from the chaos. She worked silently, her eyes heavy, her hands steady. For a moment, he just watched her, the woman who had saved his life, the woman he had ignored for years. "Grace," he said softly. She looked up, her face unreadable. "Sir." He shook his head. "No, not sir. Alexander." The sound of his first name, spoken in her voice, seemed to close a distance between them that money and walls had built for years. "Alexander," she repeated, almost hesitantly. He stepped closer. "Last night I saw a part of you no one else has, and I need to understand the rest. Why did that man know you? Why did he say you were supposed to be gone?" Her hands froze mid-motion. She set the porcelain down gently, as if afraid to shatter something more than glass. Her voice was low. "Because he knew me before this life. He was part of the mission that destroyed everything. The one that killed my unit." Alexander's chest tightened. "So they're not after me, they're after you." Her eyes flickered with guilt. "Both. You, because you're powerful. Me, because I lived. They can't let someone like me walk free, not with what I know. And now, I've dragged you into it." Before he could respond, a loud crack echoed through the mansion. The front doors splintered. Shouts filled the air. The enemy had returned, this time with more men, more fury. Guards fired back, chaos erupting instantly. Alexander's instinct was to run toward the panic, but Grace grabbed his arm. Her grip was firm, commanding, "No, stay behind me." For the first time in his life, Alexander obeyed. The intruders stormed in, weapons raised. Grace moved like lightning, her body remembering the soldier she once was. Every strike, every step was deliberate, trained, but there were too many. One man grabbed Alexander, yanking him forward. Grace spun, her eyes wide. "No!" Without hesitation, she launched herself between them. The shot rang out. A deafening silence followed. Alexander froze. His heart stopped as he saw Grace stumble, her uniform stained crimson. She had taken the bullet meant for him. "Grace!" he cried, catching her before she fell. His arms wrapped around her trembling frame as the attackers were finally overwhelmed by security. The house was secured, but inside Alexander's arms, the only thing that mattered was slipping away. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with pain. but also something softer, something that broke him more than any wound. "I told you, I wasn't just a maid," she whispered. "But even soldiers need someone to see them, and tonight you finally did." Tears blurred his vision. The billionaire who thought he was untouchable now shook like a child. "Grace, stay with me. Please, you can't leave me like this. Not when I finally see you." Her weak hand touched his cheek, the faintest smile curving her lips. "Then don't forget. Don't ever stop seeing people, even the ones you think don't matter." Her voice broke, fading. "That's where the real strength lives." Her eyes closed, her body limp against him. For a long moment Alexander sat in silence, clutching her, his world collapsing. But then her chest rose faintly, shallow but alive. She wasn't gone. Not yet. "Call the doctor!" Alexander roared. "Now!" The room filled with rushing footsteps, medics and commands, but Alexander never let go of her hand. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about money, deals, or power. He was thinking about the woman who had risked everything for him. The woman whose invisible life had just become the most visible thing in his world. Hours later, as dawn broke, Grace was stable. The doctor assured him she would live. Alexander stood by her bedside, watching the steady rhythm of her breathing. He whispered to himself, but also to her, even if she couldn't hear, "You shielded me from death, Grace. But more than that, you shielded me from myself, from my blindness, from my pride. You showed me the power in people I never saw, and I will never forget." Days turned into weeks, and when Grace finally woke, Alexander was there. He didn't greet her with orders or distance. He greeted her with respect, with gratitude, with something closer to friendship. And from that moment on, the billionaire's life began to change. Not because of wealth, but because of the maid who had once been invisible, yet carried the kind of courage money could never buy. And sometimes that's the reminder we all need. Sometimes the people we overlook are carrying stories that could change everything. Sometimes the ones who seem the smallest are the ones who shield us when it matters most. So the next time you see someone you think is invisible, an old janitor sweeping the floor, a maid polishing the table, a delivery man carrying packages, remember Grace. Remember that their courage, their pain, their humanity might just be greater than your own. Because in the end, true strength isn't about the power we build for ourselves. It's about the lives we touch when no one else is looking. And that is why the maid who shielded the billionaire wasn't just protecting his life, she was teaching him how to truly live. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel. Black Saga. Drop a comment about what part touched you the most, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.